And now I have the pleasure to announce the third speaker, who I guess will address some issues which have been addressed by Professor Mathieu in his talk. Mrs. Ruth Nordstörm is chief lawyer at the Scandinavian Human Rights Lawyers Association. She holds a Master of Law from Uppsala University and is specialized in human rights, stock exchange and e-commerce law. Quite a broad area, I would say, and very interesting. She was the legal counsel before the Swedish jurisdictions and then before the European Court of Human Rights of Mrs. Elinor Grimmark and Linda Steen, two Swedish midwives, this case has been mentioned, who have been refused employment because of their conscientious objection to abortion. Mrs. Nordstörm, it's an honor and pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here with you. And I would like to say that I understood everything of the former presentation, but I'm sorry I don't speak a word of French. But thank you anyhow, and thank you for inviting me. And thank you to the organizers and to this institute for bringing this conference together. So, I'll start right away. I'm a chief attorney of Scandinavian Human Rights Lawyers, and this is part of our team. So this is our lawyers and paralegals, and we are based in Uppsala. I founded this organization in 2012, first as an NGO, and now we are also a law firm under the Swedish Bar Association. We have been working with cases of human rights. We work with human trafficking. We work with family law, migration and asylum law, and labor law. That's our main and core issues that we work with. I've just released a book in Sweden about our fight for freedom of conscience in healthcare. And it's called To the Defense of the Defenseless, My Battle in the Swedish Corridor of Opinion. And it's two themes in the book. It's both to speak about the defenseless, to speak about the vulnerable that we defend. We have a pro bono program to defend and help homeless people, socially marginalized people, paperless migrants, and refugees. And then the other part of my book is to speak about our battle to defend these Christian midwives for 7 years. And I've chosen the theme Opinion Corridor because in Sweden it's, I would explain the opinion corridor or corridor of opinion to be that destructive climate that makes it almost impossible to discuss important but difficult ethical and moral issues publicly. If you do that, if you take a stand on these issues, you will be stigmatized, you will be shut off, and you will be marginalized. So this is my book, and it's just caused a little debate already in Sweden, and I hope it will be soon translated to English. So I'll now speak about these two cases. So it's this is outside of the District Court of Nyköping with our client midwife Linda Steen. And Linda was educated as a midwife, and she got her exam in 2015. She had a contract that said that she was promised work as a midwife for 2 years within this district. But when the county council found out that she didn't want to perform abortions, they broke her contract. We brought several witnesses to the case. One was her sister-in-law, and she was actually granted freedom of conscience. And for 40 years, there has been midwives and nurses that has been granted freedom of conscience, but just in theory, and just in maybe an oral agreement within the staff at the hospital, not a written consensus of objection, not in their contract. So this was our first case, and then our second client is Elinor Grimmark, and I just have a short video for you. She speaks in Swedish, but I have subtitles in English. I just want you to meet with her in person and hear when she speaks about her dream of becoming a midwife and why she chose to educate herself. So, let's go.
Det bästa med att jobba som barnmorska, nu är ju jobbet som barnmorska, det är ju världens bästa jobb, det förstår ju alla egentligen. Men vad är det bästa med det? Det är att man får gå in och skapa en helt ny relation. Det är helt främmande människor när man kommer in, och efter några timmar så är man så tajta. Det är fantastiskt att få verkligen bygga den relationen och vara med i deras största ögonblick när de får möta sin lilla nyfödda bebis. Det måste vara det bästa.
Yes, it's a precious little film. And Elinor, she dreamed about being this midwife and being in this precious moment where she could assist the women in delivery care and to assist them and the newborn babies, and to share that beautiful moment when a little child is taking the first breath. And she became a midwife, and she was actually working during the summer as a midwife, and she educated herself 2013. She received her midwifery exam, and she applied for 3 jobs within 3 different hospitals in Sweden. And on the 2 first, she was denied job when they found out, or she wrote an email saying that I would work at the delivery care where I have practiced during the summers, and my boss actually requested me to apply for this job. I just want to mention that I only want to work at the delivery care and postnatal care, not with abortions. I just want to make this clear. So she wrote this email, and then her boss called her saying, how could you ever even think of educating yourself to become a midwife when you're not performing abortions? So they were angry at her and shouted at her and saying, you're not welcome to come back to this hospital, not this summer, or never again. But after a while, she applied for a 3rd job at a 3rd hospital, and this was a bigger hospital, and she was denied that too. But then at another hospital, it was an option for her. It was a smaller hospital, but it was a huge lack of midwives. It was actually such a crisis that they were out demonstrating, saying it's actually a risk for the patients in the delivery care because we are so few midwives. They had to call in midwives that actually were retired to help them because it was such a huge lack of midwives. So they told her during the interview that we have read your email, and well, it could cause some problems, but maybe we could solve it. Maybe we could ask someone else to perform the late-term abortions. And you know, in Sweden, we have free abortion up until half of the pregnancy. So, I mean, it's one of the most liberal abortion laws in Europe. And what would be the case at this hospital was the late-term abortions. So that would mean abortions from week 18 to week 21, or after week 21, you have to apply to have an abortion. But actually, according to the law, there are certain criteria, but you could actually end the pregnancy and have an abortion the whole pregnancy if there are certain, measures. So this would mean that she would have had to perform late-term abortions after week 18 at the delivery care. And that was what they were discussing. And according to the statistics of the hospital, they had 900 deliveries of babies for 1 year, and it was 100 abortions. 100 abortions performed at home abortions, where the women come and they have a pill and they go home and swallow that pill and come back when they've had abortion at home. And then 100 abortions were late-term abortions at the hospital, at the delivery care. And according to statistics, it would be only one late-term abortion every year. So we're now speaking about 900 deliveries and one late-term abortion. So they said, well, we'll probably solve that. We'll give you the job. So she actually was granted this job at this Värnamo hospital. But then this case came out in the media and it exploded. It exploded. And it was hysterical. And then her boss called her and said, if you had just been quiet about this, and if you had just been quiet about your opinions, then we could have given you this job. But now, because you spoke out about this in media, we will have to withdraw your job offer or your job. So, and then the hospital said, they made a statement saying that it was now forbidden for any employer, any employee, to take a public stand against abortion in the media. So it now became an issue not only about freedom of conscience, it became an issue of freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. So, and of course, freedom of religion. She was a Christian. So, but it turned out that this case was becoming so controversial in Sweden that we were going to host a human trafficking conference at Uppsala University. And 3 days before the conference was going to be held, the royal court was going to be there, the Swedish queen was going to be there, the rapporteur of the Council of Europe against violence against women was going to be there, the UN was going to be there, the UN organization of Uppsala. And we were working on this for 6 months. 3 days before the conference was going to be held, it was all cancelled because I was the representative of this midwife. And the government's coordinator against violent extremism, Mona Sahlin, she compared us and our clients to jihadists and ISIS warriors, saying we've now had these religious extremists, as we see in the ISIS and jihadists, but we now have them even in Sweden. So, you know, this was the climate that we had in Sweden when we took this case on. So it was, I describe it in my book, and when it's translated to English, hopefully we'll find a good publishing house. You will read more about it, but just a brief glimpse of what it was like. And also in the public media, it was a news panel saying that it would be better to abort these people retroactively. And there were pictures in social media with Hitler and Donald Trump and me and Eleanor saying, what if their parents had aborted them before they were born? You know, it was just terrible. And also, you know, it was a very hostile environment and a pressure, you know, on the court, because there were several ministers of the government saying that now we really need a judgment that really denies freedom of conscience for these religious extremists. So, you know, it was kind of a pressure on the domestic courts to judge in a certain way. And also, unfortunately, we lost the case in the district court and then the labor court. And then we took the case to the European Court of Human Rights. And after 3 years, the European Court of Human Rights said that they decided not to hear the case. And it was a Swedish judge in the decision, and the Swedish judge had worked for the government for 30 years, and the Swedish judge had also worked with the employer of our clients and funded them and so on. So we have now applied for revision of the case, and we have not heard from the European Court of Human Rights for 1 year, but we still have that application for revision. So I'll just briefly now, by the end of my presentation, go through just very, very briefly some of our legal arguments in our complaint. So, of course, we found it on the Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and it's very clear that freedom of conscience and thought and religion is a basic human right. And according to Article 9.2, there are certain criteria that need to be fulfilled to make an intervention in these rights. Then we have the soft law. We have the resolutions of the Council of Europe. For example, we have this resolution 1763 from 2010. It was actually initiated by the Swedish MEP that tried to make a resolution that would restrict freedom of conscience, but this was the opposite. So it's very clear freedom of conscience for healthcare workers, and it's regarding abortion, and it says that no person, hospital, or institutions shall be coerced, held liable, or discriminated against in any matter because of refusal to perform, accommodate, assist, or submit to abortion, human miscarriage, euthanasia, or any act which could cause the death of a human fetus or embryo for any reason. So, and as you may know, the European Court of Human Rights could use these soft law resolutions in their decisions. And then, of course, we have all the International Code of Ethics, for example, for midwives. And it says that midwives may decide not to participate in activities for which they hold deep moral opposition. However, the emphasis on individual conscience should not deprive women of essential healthcare services. And then midwives with conscientious objection to a given service request will refer the woman to another provider where such a service can be provided. Actually, in Sweden, the midwife union was not so happy about this, so they decided that they would work to remove this from the National Code of Ethics for midwives. They haven't succeeded yet, as far as I know. But we used this in our claim, of course. And then just very briefly, for an interference under Article 9 to be justified, there are 3 criteria that need to be fulfilled. The interference must be prescribed by law. Secondly, the interference must pursue a legitimate aim. And then thirdly, the interference must be necessary in a democratic society, and it must be proportionate. So, according to the Swedish Abortion Act from 1974, it says, only a certified physician can perform abortion or terminate pregnancy under paragraph 6. I think this is very clear. From this law, could you say that there is support in Swedish law to force midwives to perform abortions, that according to the law itself, you need to be another profession? I think it's crystal clear. There's no provision in the Swedish abortion law that you could say to use to perform, to ask or force midwives to perform abortion. According to the Swedish law, it's only doctors that could perform abortion. So it's unbelievable after 7 years that they actually could use this to say that there's support in the law. And also, according to the preparatory acts of the Abortion Act, it says, the question of healthcare staff's obligation to participate in abortion has been raised by several referral agencies who emphasize the importance of taking into account the wishes of the staff not to participate in abortion operations or procedures. So when the law was written, it was very clear that freedom of conscience was a criteria for healthcare workers. And this was doctors. It was, just in practice. And also for 40 years, we've had, like I said, ad hoc agreements between, oral agreements. But we've not had it as a basic right. But it was very clear from the beginning, when the law was written, it was very clear that freedom of conscience should be respected. And then secondly, does interference pursue a legitimate aim? And, what was said during the whole proceedings was that women's right to abortion and women's access to abortion. But it's very clear that no woman has ever been denied abortion in Sweden. But what is denied is actually safe healthcare in delivery care. Because we shut out these Christian midwives from delivery care, and there's such a huge lack of midwives. And also, the national authorities, of course, have a duty to provide healthcare services that doesn't remove the convention right of healthcare staff, as they have done in this case. So we said it was not prescribed by law, and it doesn't pursue a legitimate aim. And also the third question, was interference necessary in a democratic society, and was it proportionate? And then we brought up evidence that over 40 countries in Europe respect freedom of conscience. And then to say that over 40 countries in Europe can accommodate this right, and 40 countries in Europe, including our neighboring countries, Norway and Denmark. How could Sweden say that our healthcare system is so different that it's impossible for us to respect this fundamental human right? So it's a clear European standard on the area. And so we said that the third criteria is not fulfilled either. I want to close with this. This is a quote I have on my wall in my office. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politically correct? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when we must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but we must take it because conscience tells us is right. And I want to close with this, and I want to say that I respect you, all of you, for taking a stand for freedom of conscience, and I hope that we can encourage more to do so. And I would love to stay in touch with you. If you are on social media, please connect on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. So thank you.